Hello, and welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. We're sharing our own insights as authors who've been publishing since the beginning of the e-reader revolution, and we're also interviewing industry experts and other successful authors to help you figure out what's working right now. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lallo.
And I'm Andrea Pearson.
And today we're going to continue interviewing each other as we've been doing the last couple of shows. We're going to be digging a little deeper with Joe Lallo today, talking a little bit about him. And we're also going to be asking him some tips for diversifying his income, or diversifying your income in general as an author, and making more money so that all your eggs aren't in one basket. And Joe's been wide pretty much since the beginning, so I think he can give us some good insight, and he's also doing Patreon and a few other things. Joe, I guess we'll just start it out. What did you do before you became a full-time author, and what kind of gave you your first hint of success?
Well, okay, so before I was a full-time author, I went to college at NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, to be a computer engineer, and I got a master's degree in computer engineering. And then straight out of college, in fact, while I was getting my master's, I got a job working at Horizon. Okay, this is the string. At Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield for IBM via Infinite Computer Solutions. So I was a subcontractor for IBM working at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. That kind of job. It was IT. I was supporting the interactive voice response system. So the machine that answers the phone when you call.
I actually didn't know this about you. We've never asked this question before on the old show. I mean, I knew you were like a computer engineer guy, but all right, carry on.
My job was doing statistics on how people use the system so that we can figure out how to get more people to use the system. It was very interesting. I did that for 9 years, and then they offered me a $15,000 raise in exchange for becoming a salaried employee, which meant unlimited unpaid overtime. And I would be taking the place of my supervisor without a replacement for my own position. So I would be doing two jobs for that. And while that realistically was a decent job to have, I knew that I would go insane if I did it. And more importantly, I wouldn't have any time to write. And by the time they made that offer, I was making more money from the books than I was even with the raise they were offering me. So that's when I decided to go full time. But so several years before that, obviously, is when I got my first taste of success. If I was already out earning the day job, I had published in 2010, January 2010. In May of 2011, I made The Book of Deacon, the first book in the Book of Deacon trilogy, which has now got 5 books. So the Book of Deacon saga. I made it free, perma-free, because I think Brian S. Pratt, I think it was the person who I had heard did it. So I did that too. And I got picked up by a blog called Pixel of Ink, which back then you could make affiliate money off of links to free books. So there was an entire industry based around finding free books to share. So Pixel of Ink was a big name in that, and I got a ton of downloads, and it got me up in the ranks. Back then, also, free books were side by side with paid books on the top list. So if you were at the top of the free list, you were showing up on the same page as someone like Stephen King. So I made a couple of $1,000s, and I turned that couple of $1,000s into a couple of covers. And I just started cranking out books a little bit faster and paying more attention to my quality. And it sort of built slowly from there. That first $3,000 took another like 5 months before I was making that much money again. But then a year after that, I was making 6 figures. That's sort of how things went.
All right. So for those who don't know you, how long have you been writing? So was it something you'd been doing your whole entire life since you were a kid? And when and why? Well, you already just answered when, but why did you decide to self-publish?
All right. I started writing like very, very young. I mean, if I want to go into like full anecdotes, when I was in kindergarten, we had to write a story. We didn't know how to write. Like there was no words. So we had to come up with a story, and the teacher would write it for us. And she edited me. She was, I used a phrase, caught the side of, like, oh, the sun caught the side of the cloud. And she was like, the sun saw the cloud. And I'm like, don't edit me. But yeah, so I was doing it since then. But the story that eventually became the Book of Deacon, I started writing in like 2nd grade. And then I rewrote it, and I rewrote it. And then by high school, it was starting to look like what would eventually become the finished product. And then by college, I started working on the finished product. not that I had ever intended to publish it, because I was afraid of being judged, and just basically I was ashamed. I was ashamed of the idea that I might have written a book. So it was a secret to everyone but my closest friends. And then eventually I came clean to my closest friends, like, hey, remember that thing I was writing in grammar school? It's finished. And they said, well, you should try to get it published. And this was traditionally published. So then I tried to get an agent, and I was judged and rejected of several dozen times. And I was like, I don't like this. And they said, well, then try self-publishing. I said, okay. So it was never my idea. My friends pushed me into both of those things.
Good for your friends.
Yeah, no, yeah, I've thanked them many, many times. They are in the acknowledgments of almost every one of my books.
Have you killed them off too? In any of your books?
No. Have I? No. There are characters based on both of them. One of them, no, they're both still alive. Although one of them is not terribly admirable as a character.
That's awesome.
All right. Now that you've been in the industry for 8-9 years, as we all have, we've all kind of seen a lot of people hit it really big, and some of them went on to traditionally publish. Some of them went on to, or just have continued to successfully self-publish. But we've also seen a lot of people disappear. It's definitely been a challenge to kind of keep things rolling. What are your thoughts on how things have been going, last 9 years? And is there anything you're struggling with, as we all are?
Yeah. I mean, what I've learned mostly in this time, like that I've been doing this, is I've learned about myself how to streamline and expedite my own process. Like I've seen a lot of people not really grow. Like craft is one thing, but like once you've written your first book, again, if I started in second grade and published in college, you can do math on figuring out how long it took me to get. So I've learned to you need to get a process down and you need to keep at it. I've learned the consistency is important. I've learned that for me, outlining and setting word quotas and stuff was important to really get a book out quickly that makes sense and doesn't need a lot of revision. I got pretty good at formatting ebooks and stuff. So basically I learned sort of how to make a business and a procedure out of everything, and that it's necessary to do so. What I'm struggling with right now is a lot. Right now, I'm struggling an awful lot. I'm in the midst of probably my biggest slump in sales since I went pro. And it's mostly because my old tactics had been too successful for too long. The keystone of my old tactics were I had 3 perma-free series starters, and I would funnel readers back to them every time I released a new book, which was about once a year in each of those series. And it kept me pretty steady at almost exactly $100,000 in earnings on those series for several years, and I got comfortable with it. And I would, obviously we're doing our own podcast, and I was keeping up on different trends and stuff, but I wasn't really dedicating myself to adapting because I didn't need to. My sales were strong. And then about 2 years ago, over that time, perma-free was steadily eroding as a technique. And I was doing pretty well because, as we're going to talk about, I was diversified. So every time it slumped here, I had another hose fill in the bucket. But about 2 years ago, I saw the writing on the wall, and I decided to start doing some serious restructuring and sort of adapt to some of the new techniques. So we're going to talk a lot, I'm sure, in the future about how a rapid release, and I've never really done a lot of dedicated advertising. So I started working on all that, and that's what I'm struggling with right now. I've essentially had to completely develop a new publishing strategy, and you don't do it perfectly the first time. I'm very well educated in the area, but very novice at actually executing it. So right now I'm just getting my feet wet in KU, and I'm just getting, the process down for rapid release because I've never done that before. I'm just starting to look very seriously into having sort of maintenance advertising always going. And it's not easy. And until I get good at it, I'm going to be looking at some, I'm going to be looking at income that's not what I was accustomed to. So I guess the short answer is things have been getting harder, and adaptation is important.
Yeah, I feel like everybody kind of feels that out there, that, unless they're just starting now and they don't have any preconceived notions or expectations but you're hearing from a lot of people well, you kind of have to advertise now. It used to be like you were saying, if you made the first one free, I miss the good old days too, although your books always did better than mine because you had better covers. I remember the Book of Deacon was always in that top 100 free epic fantasy list near the top.
it stuck there for a long time. I got overly comfortable with that.
Are you finding that the perma-free is still working on the other sites, or have things tailed off over there too? I mean, because I found that they have tailed off, but I also haven't been. I've been doing KU for new releases, so kind of neglecting the other sites other than occasional promos.
Yeah, perma-free has gotten weaker across the board. I don't keep like day-to-day tabs on how my wide stuff is doing, but just when I do my sort of end of month and end of year wrap ups, the perma-free is way down across the board. It's still useful, and it's still primarily until I get better at the new stuff, it's still primarily where my money's coming from, but it's definitely just gotten less powerful across the board.
Okay, so what sorts of things have you done to get better as a writer other than writing more, practicing? Have you taken any classes or any courses on it?
I haven't done a tremendous amount in terms of like craft education for my craft. I for a long time early in my career, I stopped reading other people's books because I stopped reading other fiction because I was afraid that I was going to inadvertently adapt to their style. I have a tendency, like if I listen to a certain type of dialogue in a movie or something, I find myself writing absorbing that, and I was afraid that I was going to basically just start accidentally plagiarizing. This is a very stupid thing to do. Reading is extremely important.
Wait, plagiarizing is stupid?
Plagiarizing is stupid, but also being afraid that simply reading somebody else's work will cause you to plagiarize is stupid.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been doing recently is getting back into reading fiction far more regularly so I can sort of increase the creative fuel in my brain. But I have really started to take beta reading more seriously. There was a time when beta reading was just, I would say to my friends, hey, listen, would you like to read the book? It's finished now. Or I would say to a circle of my readers, hey, would you like to read the book? It's finished now. And I might only get one or two people who actually read it. And I would go through their stuff and I would discuss it with them and I'd be done. Nowadays, I pay a couple beta readers now, people who are not just friends or avid readers, but who don't have a dog in the game, whether or not I like them after they talk to me, So people who take it very seriously, also still my friends, also still my my fans. But I've done some developmental editing, and also the editors that I work with now typically give me I've been lucky enough that the editors I work with tend to enjoy what I write, and therefore they tend to have an opinion about what I write. So I get a little bit more editorial just assessment on my stuff, and I take it a lot more seriously now. There was a time when I would ask a beta reader for information, and then if they gave me a plot point they didn't like, I didn't particularly care if they didn't like that plot point. That's what happened, and I would just adjust the things that were like plot holes. But nowadays, I'm just sort of I try to take a lot more of the ego out, and when other people give me feedback, I try to assess it on artistic level, not on a personal level. So treat it more like a work of art and less an expression of myself, although those are supposed to be the same thing, I guess.
So you've gotten more humble over the years, and I've gotten more prideful.
I guess.
In the beginning, I was like, I used 100 or almost 200 beta readers for one of my books, and having so many hands in the pie, because I was insecure about my writing, having so many hands in the pie made it harder to catch my own style. And so I don't actually use any beta readers now.
There you go. There's 1,000 different avenues to this stuff.
All right. Well, why don't we kind of move into talking about diversifying income now, and maybe how people can find some extra sources if they're looking for that. What would you say, there's like ebooks, audiobooks, print, foreign rights, all sorts of things we can be doing. What are some of your major sources of income now and have been in the past?
Well, not surprisingly, ebooks are the top of the heap by a huge margin. I am wide with almost all of my books, and I have about 50-50 split on income from Amazon and wide. And that's partially because I've been wide since the beginning, and I've dedicated a fair amount of effort in the past to maintaining sales on non-Amazon. I've done a lot of Kobo and a lot of Apple promotional stuff. Even with recent KU stuff, that really hasn't changed the spread. Again, because I'm new to the rapid release and the KU, so I haven't had it explode on me, so it hasn't changed the balance very much. Aside from ebooks, believe it or not, foreign rights right now is my second biggest earner, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it has had a surprising effect on my my bottom line for the past almost 3 years. Past that, audiobooks have been picking up for me. Most of my stuff is traditional for audiobooks, so I had advances that had to get earned back, but it's somewhere over in the pile next to me. I just got my first royalty statement that 4 or 5 of my books have not earned back their advance, and I'm starting to get regular payments on those. So I'm starting to see, actual numbers as opposed to nothing. And I have a couple of my own self-produced things as well. And then there's a lot of a unsurprisingly large amount of my income is one-off stuff like Story Bundle, or on every now and then I've been a paid contributor to anthologies and stuff, and that it tends not to be a huge chunk of my annual income, but on a given month when I actually get paid for that, it tends to be nice. And Patreon is sort of in the mix now too. There's other things beyond that are peppered in and out, but the stuff below Patreon, we're talking, $20 a month in total.
All right. Okay. So what portion of your income comes from the above? You actually kind of already answered that. But do you feel like using all of these things is important? Or if you had to do it all over again, is there a different focus that you would have taken?
I guess if I had to break it down to like percentages, probably 85% of my stuff comes from my earnings come from ebooks across both Amazon and wide. Probably another 10% comes from audio and foreign rights combined, and the rest is print bundles and all that. It's probably 5%. That makes 100. I feel like if it's a do it once, sell it forever sort of thing, it's usually worth the effort, even if it doesn't make a lot of money right away. I mean, if you can spend 2 hours making something into a paperback, and then the paperback is going to make you a couple of dollars a month forever, that's worth doing. Even if you don't see a huge income from it right away, especially paperbacks and stuff, having at least one physical thing, I think, is definitely important, because ebooks aren't usually given as gifts, and physical items often are. So back when I was doing particularly well with the Book of Deacon trilogy, when they were still relatively new, I might only make $20 or $25 worth of print sales a month. But then when Christmas came, I was making $300 or $400 a month for November and December. So, I mean, again, for something that took an hour and a half to do, that's absolutely worth it, and it happens every year. So it's worth doing. The stuff that's more one-off, like the bundles, for example, a bundle is a lot of work and it pays off exactly once. So you have to sort of pay attention and calibrate the amount of work you do versus the amount of benefit you get. And it's not all the money. I mean, a bundle also gets your name out and all that stuff. And that's another thing you need to keep in mind. Sometimes the stuff that doesn't make you money does get you, interaction and does do networking. So again, I guess the short answer is, if it's scalable income, do oneself forever, it's almost always worth doing. And and then actually there's a third thing in that list, which is stuff that is do it once, sell it forever, but costs a lot of money. And that is self-producing audiobooks, for example. Worth doing if you have the money to spend. But if you don't, probably let it wait, I would say, or find a way to do it more cheaply. But overall, that's where it stands.
For your ebooks, I know that, like me, you were Smashwords because they were the only distributor in the game back in like 2010. Now there's Drafted Digital, and I think Publish Drive 2 is getting more popular. For those that might be out there wondering if they should just use a distributor to get into the other non-Amazon stores, or if it's worth making accounts everywhere that has a self-publishing platform, what do you do? Do you upload everywhere individually, or do you just use Smashwords? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think, what I do is I use Smashwords. Well, I use Amazon directly, as I think everyone should. In fact, I think everyone has to. I do Google directly, and everything else is Smashwords. If you were a very, very dedicated business person, and you want to really get the maximum output to the minimum input, you probably will make more money and have more flexibility for promotions and stuff if you do everything directly. I am not that dedicated to actually like absolutely maximizing. We're talking a few percent difference in many cases. So I trade off that little bit of control and that little bit of income for a lot of convenience. So I usually recommend doing things the way I do if you're comfortable, and that is because having a distributor streamlines a lot of stuff. New releases go way faster because you only have to upload to a couple of places, as opposed to potentially 8 or 9. I only have to do 3. Likewise for updates.
Just to give a perspective of a full-time mom, I started paying my assistant to upload for me, and I found that her fee was about the same as what I would have paid Smashwords, but Smashwords I have a merchandiser at. And so I think that, if you have like 2 hours a day, are you going to spend it uploading to different retailers? Or are you going to spend it writing something else and pay somebody to do something? Or are you going to use a distributor? So that's something that authors are going to have to ask themselves, where would they want to put their focus and all that.
Yeah, if you are the kind of person, and this really does come down to the amount of output you have. If you're the kind of person who can put a real, genuine value on 2 or 3 hours of your time a month, then you should be either using a distributor or hiring someone. And hiring someone is the other way. If you can afford to and justify hiring someone because the handful of hours that you would have spent doing it yourself is too much, absolutely do it. Because first off, having a direct account in a lot of cases is going to allow you to make a little bit more money. It's often going to allow you to use their promotional tools far more directly. For a long time, that was the case with Kobo. You had to go through Kobo's platform in order to be part of their most of their promos. If you happen to be in good with Smashwords, and often Smashwords will sort of pass you through to Kobo like that. But yeah, if you genuinely know, I can get a non-trivial amount of work done in 2 hours that in the long run will make me a lot more money, then either use the distributors or hire somebody.
To chime in with a third perspective, I upload everywhere I can and I do it myself. I don't trust other people with my account information, so there's just no way that would ever be passed off. But honestly, a new book, it takes less than an hour to get it up on all the sites. I do Apple myself, Kobo myself, Google Play myself, and Barnes & Noble myself. And then I use Smashwords because there's still stores you can't get into. And we should point out, even though we may all be with Smashwords because we started that's who it was. That was the only game in town. A lot of people really like Drafted Digital, and the guys that work there are really good, and they go to a lot of the conferences and stuff. So I would actually probably recommend them just because it's more, I think it's going to be easier to make connections there if you're newer.
And their website's friendlier, honestly, than Smashwords is.
They do. They have a lot of author features too. They have that we mentioned using bookstoread.com to make reader links, and that's actually owned by Drafted Digital, and they just put it out there. I use it even though I don't use them, and it's not that I haven't thought about it, but it's then you're splitting your catalog in half, and you're like half a series is up with this distributor, and it's not going to get linked if it goes out to the sites and it's up, books 5 through 7 or with another distributor. So just some differing perspectives there.
Yeah, I also I'm with Smashwords. I will continue to be with Smashwords, and I like Smashwords, but I very freely recommend Drafted Digital for people who are just getting started. Also, I should say another thing that weighs in on my decision to use a distributor versus going direct is it simplifies record keeping a little bit. Like instead of getting payments from 1,000 different places and getting 1,000 different 1099s, you get a much more streamlined information. Sometimes that information is very delayed, but it still comes from only 3 places instead of 8 places. And if that's important to you, then it's another reason to use a distributor.
That's a really good point, actually. How often do you try new ways to make money? So if you hear something that sounds really cool, really exciting, do you jump onto it quickly, or do you tend to wait to see if it'll last or pan out?
It depends. I experiment pretty frequently. Often very goofy things I do, but at least every few months, I'll test the waters in some kind of weird merchandise or wacky side project. Most of them never even see the light of day. I'll get started on it and see how useful it looks like it'll be, and maybe even actually get a product, but then never do anything with that product because I realize once I have it that maybe distributing it is too difficult and it's better just as a giveaway, or maybe I'll decide that in order to make this a going concern, it would take way too much work to continue doing it. So I don't want to set the expectations that I will continue doing it. But whether it's doing web comics or making, I have, if you're watching the video, I have figurines that you can buy, and I have coins that you can get. Don't ask me how you're supposed to get them because I haven't set up a storefront yet.
That's awesome.
Although you can get the figurines on Shapeways, but basically, if it's something that's super easy, that like I'm already in place for, I jump on it immediately. Like there was, we're going to talk a little bit about Find Away Voices at one point, which is a competitor to ACX. I had a couple of things I could put on there, and I found out that they were there. So within a week, I was on there because why wouldn't I be? But if it's something like, if it's a store that would require exclusivity, I'm going to be very, very careful about getting on there. I'm going to really weigh the thing. So if it's low impact or low effort, I get on it right away. If it's something that requires a lot more dedication and ongoing attention, like Patreon, I take my time and see really if I have any use for it, or if I have if it's applicable to my business model.
Yeah, I didn't start a Patreon account until this year. And it's one of those things, these people that are supporting me on Patreon would have supported me 8 years ago or whenever Patreon came out. And so I kind of regret not doing it a lot earlier, Have you tried any print formats other than the standard paperback? So like large print, hardback, mass paperback, any of that kind of stuff?
Traditionally, I haven't, but and I had, like, behind the scenes, I had to walk away and get this after we started. Hardcover is coming. Somebody, one of my fans, the 10th anniversary for the Book of Deacon is coming up, and one of my fans was like, "You don't have any hardcovers, and you're the only one of my favorite authors who I don't have any hardcovers on my shelf for. I'd really want hardcovers." And I had stayed off of hardcovers for the longest time because they would cost a lot more, and self-esteem is often a problem in indie authors, or just authors in general. I really didn't think I had enough people out there who would pay the price for a hardcover to make it worth doing a hardcover. And when I first got started, hardcovers were a giant pain to do print on demand, and you had to do a print run. Nowadays, print on demand looks roughly like this for people watching the video, and it's still way more expensive to the consumer, and therefore to me if I was to be selling them directly. But no inventory, and do it once, sell it forever. So it was it fit my criteria for giving it a try. I'm not done yet because there's a couple of art things I need to do, because it's a 10th anniversary edition, so I'm going to try to enhance it. But so I'm dabbling in that, and I think what it's probably going to end up being is just another entry on my Amazon page, and another way that people can another option people have. But again, it's another tiny hose going into a tub that hopefully will keep it full.
Where do you get your hardcovers done?
This is from Ingram Spark. It's actually surprisingly easy to adapt a regular book to a hardcover. If you have done paperback, the way I do print, in case anyone's wondering, I go both KDP print and Ingram Spark. I do KDP print without extended catalog, so I can keep the price low, and then I do Ingram Spark for everything that would have been in the extended catalog for KDP print. But if you do Ingram Spark, you can use, I think, an identical content file. Like if you do this is a 6x9, which is what I do my standard paperbacks in. I think you can use exactly the same file and just get another ISBN, and you'll need a new cover, which is one of the art things I needed to do. But if you're friendly with your cover designer, then adapting a paperback cover to a hardcover is just adding bleed around the edge and flaps around the inside, and I think it cost me $25 to get a new cover, so that should pay for itself pretty quick.
That was $25 from your cover designer?
Yes.
Okay.
Technically, it also costs a setup fee on Ingram Spark to do any book, but there are ways around that. If you are, for example, in Novelists Incorporated, then you can get free setup on your Ingram Spark files. And I'm sure there's a dozen other similar deals with other people.
Now, I don't know if you remember from when we were at the WMG Business Masterclass a couple of years ago, but that year and then last year again, they talked about mass market style paperbacks and large print and how they're both pretty popular right now. At least they were, back then. I don't know if this year that's the same. But do you think you'll ever try those out?
Large print, I could foresee doing both of them. I mean, again, it is seriously, if you've ever formatted a paperback, especially if you have vellum, which I don't, but if you ever format a paperback, it's very, very simple. It really boils down to, once you've got the margins and stuff in place, you're changing 6 or 7 numbers to get a new format. So I don't see any reason why I wouldn't do it, especially large print. Except I would probably only do my shorter books in large print, because, believe it or not, because of the length of books I write, some of the stuff I wanted to have in paperback, I can't because it's too much. I had the Book of Deacon anthology is too many pages to make into a 6x9 paperback.
Believe it or not, those 600,000 word books, they're just
yeah, they really add up, it turns out.
Yeah.
So I don't see why I wouldn't do it. I understand, like, it gets tricky with mass market paperbacks because the size, all it is a slightly smaller size. And it will get distributed differently. Different stores carry these things, but it's really like inside baseball to understand the actual value of doing a mass market paperback. So of the two, probably large print is the one I do preferentially.
Yeah, back in the day, the mass market used to be on different type of paper and different type of book covers and things like that. They were way cheaper. But now, I mean, Amazon doesn't even have from last I checked, they don't even have an option to check that it is the mass market paperback.
Yeah, I actually haven't done any hardbacks or played with that at all yet. I'll be curious if either of you guys do the large print, if you sell enough for it to be worth the effort. I know Joanna's talked about it on the Creative Pen, and she seems to be a fan. I suppose it's something that if my current cover designers happen to say, hey, we're adding this for $25 extra or something, I'd be like, oh, okay, let's give it a try. I do think there's some value in having a more expensive version of your book on your Amazon sales page. That's why I like doing the audiobooks and the print books. And then, the ebook's only $4.99. It looks like a great deal. Whereas if the ebook is the only thing there and it's $4.99, you might be thinking, well, there's other 99-cent ebooks. Maybe I'll try that. But we talked a little bit about Patreon there. What has been your experience with that and crowdfunding, if you've done any other kinds of it? I know it's kind of a thing to wrestle with. Are you going to make enough for it to be worth doing extra content? I actually have a Patreon, and I just use it to, as I mentioned, kind of sell the advanced copies before they go into Kindle or KDP Select and become exclusive with Amazon. And I rarely do anything specifically for the Patreon folks as far as writing new content. But I think you do short stories.
I do. My primary, I technically started the Patreon in expectation of doing the same thing you're doing, using it as a way to pre-sell the stuff that will be Amazon exclusive to people who don't want to buy it on Amazon. But I also, I have a thing, again, this will be the first time mentioning it, I suppose, on this podcast. I have a thing called the bad idea file. Occasionally I'll get an idea in my head which is distracting, and I can't get it out of my head without writing it. So I will take, say, a weekend sometimes, a day that I would normally not get any writing done, or maybe when I'm in between projects, and I'll just sort of write a premise or a couple of thousand words of an idea just to get it out of my head.
Bad idea file? Those poor ideas.
The bad idea file. Yeah. Okay, well, again, sometimes they become novels, but generally speaking, I have a very, very large, at this point, over 100,000 words of just stuff I wrote that I knew I wouldn't be able to sell.
Now, your pizza oven dragon, is that one of them?
That came out of the bad idea file. That started off as the artist who created that concept. I really liked the art they were doing, and I thought the concept was neat. So I asked permission to write a single chapter, just to say, this will be an interesting thing. And I did, and people that I shared it with liked it. So I wrote another chapter, and by the time I have 2 chapters, well, that's, a third of the way to a book as far as my brain is concerned. So I took the extra 3 weeks and turned it into a book. But so basically Patreon is that. Patreon was a way to take those ideas I had and give a couple of hours more work to each one, and then give them away to people who support me at different levels. And I like it. I like Patreon. I'd like to do more with it. At no point have I really pushed it as a product. I let people know about it periodically, but I've never made a concerted effort to drive people to it, because I feel like if I wanted to make that a giant part of my career, the pressure to do content on a far more regular basis would be too much, and I would start losing focus on my writing. But I really like Patreon as a way to give away stuff that's too short to sell individually, and to just. I also crave feedback a lot more than many other authors do. Like, as I say, I'm afraid to be judged. I also very much like to, hear what people think of my stuff if they like it. So having a regular output, it was a way for me to keep my fans engaged in between book releases, and I think it's very useful for that too. But yeah, that's basically my only major experience with this kind of crowdfunding, and I'm hoping to expand it in the future.
We should point out, too, that there are some authors, especially a lot of traditionally published authors, or I say a couple I know of, that they may be kind of hampered with how fast they can produce. And so maybe they can only put out one book a year with their publisher. And there's a couple on Patreon that are making like 5,000 to 10,000 extra a month by doing some extra short stories. And I think that's another scenario where it can be really good, because they're mid-size or mid-list authors basically, but they have a pretty big fan base built up. It's just that they get so much less income from the actual books, a smaller percentage, that 5,000 or 10,000 a month over there could be amazing. I do find with indie authors, when you get to the point where you can make thousands, you're probably making so much from your books that then you kind of have to weigh, like, is it worth the time? But it sounds like it's something you enjoy, and that's really cool.
Yeah. Plus, it sort of gives you a separate tier of fan. Like, you got however many hundreds of people will buy your books, or thousands of people will buy your books, and how many hundreds maybe will interact with you on your various things. But then you have the tier who are willing to pay you every month, and you can sort of reward them and sort of use them as a focus group, and that's useful too.
That is true. You have the people that are willing to pay a little more probably than there's the Amazon people or whoever will pay full price for a book. And then there's the people who only buy the 99-cent stuff or only read your stuff with their KU subscription. And I'm happy to have readers from all over. But yeah, I do find that the people who pay more tend to be less demanding in general. There's a lot of you get emails from people in KU that are really disgruntled that all of your stuff isn't in KU. And I'm like, well, is it okay if I charge full price for some of it? I mean, is that okay? So it is, yeah, it kind of gives you a list of people who are like, yeah, these are folks that are willing to pay full price and maybe even support you for a little extra.
That's a really good point. Lindsay, you have a $25 level tier on your Patreon, don't you?
I do. And I was surprised there's only 4 or 5 people that do it, but I was like, why? I even say it on there. I'm like, don't subscribe at this level. I'm like, just because sometimes people will say oh, can I give you a tip or something? I'm like, well, if you want to. But there are some people that, have been paying that for every book, and I'm amazed. And I've sent some paperbacks and stuff, because you feel like I got to give these guys something extra. And for people that pay more than $5, I usually throw in bonus books because my catalog's big enough now that I have all sorts of random stuff. The Goblin Brothers Adventures, the first set of short stories that I published, and then my pen name stuff too. So I'll give them extras, and I usually give the higher paying folks audiobooks too when I produce them myself and actually have the files. Joe, have you done a Kickstarter? That's another one I know a lot of people wonder about it and try out.
I haven't done I personally haven't done a Kickstarter, although for the paperback, again, the hardcover. I said I wanted to do an enhanced edition. I'm thinking of doing one of those Kickstarters where it's really more about the stretch goals, where it's whatever, I'll have a ridiculously low goal, but then it's if you want there to be, chapter illustrations per chapter, then, we'll hit this level. But I have been a part of successful Kickstarters. There's 2 anthologies I was in, one of which was a Stabby Award winner. So if I wanted to be very vague, I could just call myself an award-winning artist. I won 1/30th of a Stabby. And those were, I mentioned earlier, paid anthologies. Those were 2 paid anthologies I was in. It was Neverland's Library was the first one, and the other one, it now has a different name. It was called Blackguards at the time. I forget what it's called now. They had to reach. It was a whole thing. Originally, it was called Rogues, and then George R Martin released an anthology called Rogues. So they changed it to Blackguards, and now it's got a third name. But those were successful, and first off, I wouldn't have been paid for those short stories if they weren't successful. So I definitely am happy they happened. But also, those have been some of the titles I've done that sort of had the biggest outside my fan base distribution. So I found them to be pretty darn useful, which is partially why I want to try doing one of my own one of these days.
I actually did a Kickstarter early on in my career as an author. I think it was about 2012. At that point, I was making some money. I think I had maybe 4 novels out in my Emperor's Edge series, but I wasn't yet making piles of money. And I wanted to do the audiobooks for the series. And I was looking at, about 3,000 each. This is kind of before ACX and making things a little easier to find narrators and all that. So, but I did find a little production company that was willing to take it on. And I was like, well, let me see if I can get the money from the readers that they might want the audiobook files. And so it was successful. I think I asked for maybe 3,000 and got like 5,000 or something like that. So that can be an option if you have a little bit of a fan base, you're getting started and you do have some readers that would maybe support a project. I do think it's tough if you're just starting out. I've seen authors try to finance the production of their first ebook in paperback and try to get like $1,000 or $1,200 for that, which is understandable because that'll be the cost of the editing easily, But I usually say them not get any backers because they don't have a fan base yet. So it is, one of those things like once you're kind of a midlist author, you can use that to do some successful projects. And mine was pretty small there, just doing the audiobooks. And I think I spent as much time on ordering paperbacks and, hand signing all the paperbacks with individual messages because those were the gifts or whatever I gave away. So that was a lot of time. But I like Michael Sullivan is someone we had on the old show. He's a fantasy author that started out as indie and went traditional, and now he's kind of a mix of both. But if you go look him up on Kickstarter, he's had some really successful ones. I think he's done 3 or 4, and I think he made like at least 80,000 on one. So not too shabby at all. But go ahead, Andrea. Let's move on to artwork. I know you wanted to. Joe's big on that and likes to talk on about that, and I know nothing about it. So take over.
Okay, so Joe, I know from listening to the science fiction fantasy marketing podcast that you use commissioned artwork a lot. Have you tried monetizing that in any way? So like using it as a download incentive or reader reward? Basically, do you think that commissioned artwork has helped your bottom line in any way? Maybe by keeping fans interested in the series or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, even if it wasn't going to help my bottom line, I would definitely still get commissioned artwork because I like commissioned artwork. At some point, well, this again, if you're watching the video behind me, there is a cabinet. The entire purpose of that cabinet is to be filled with all the cool stuff that I've commissioned over the years. But I have toyed with monetizing this stuff a lot. Earlier, I held up a figurine. That was a result of one of the things I'll commission is figurines of my characters because they're cool. And I'll show them off. And that's the primary use that I get out of artwork is that we show off art and it gets people talking. So if I have a thing that I want to talk about online that I want to talk about a character, or just make a post on the Facebook page because I haven't done so in a while, it gets a much bigger response if it's got some artwork associated with. And there's lots of people who use just stock art for that sort of thing, but I have an enormous reservoir of commissioned artwork that I can use. So it's very, very useful for that. But there were enough people who were super interested in the figurines that I had digital files made, and you can buy those figurines on Shapeways. Hasn't been a huge income, but it was a way that I could monetize. I've also in the past thought about, I probably still will one of these days, doing an art book. The issue there is rights, and the issue with all of this is rights. Just because you commissioned a piece of artwork doesn't mean you're allowed to sell it. It depends upon what the artist, what agreement you have with the artist. Plenty of artists would be like, no, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if you commission from me, the artwork is yours. Some of them will be like, just give me credit. Some people will say you can sell it as is, but you can't modify it in any way. And sometimes it gets sliced up. So, this can be a book cover and a promotional item, but you can't sell it as, say, a poster or a t-shirt. So all that stuff you need to, think about and settle with your artist. But once you do, I have t-shirts that are based either directly or indirectly on art that I've had done. Again, I don't really push them at all, but it's a way to monetize this stuff. And I have also, you talk about download incentives early on, and it was one of the more successful things at the time. I had a very nice like desktop background sized and phone background sized. I had all sorts of different formats. Sketch of the main characters of the Book of Deacon series, and that was available to people who signed up for my newsletter for a couple of months, for probably almost a year. My primary newsletter perk was you got to download the full resolution copy of that thing, and a surprising number of people signed up specifically to get access to that piece of artwork. So there's I got a lot of value out of the art over the years, and I will continue to commission art well into the future.
So, okay, that's pretty cool, actually. I want to ask a little bit more about, you said you used them in Facebook posts. Now, would you use like a piece of artwork from the series you were talking about in that Facebook post? Or, I mean, just any piece of artwork that's been commissioned?
There's a couple different ways I'll do it. Sometimes the Facebook post is literally like, if I don't have any announcement to make, sometimes a Facebook post is literally, hey, here's the picture of that character you guys like. And that's it. It's just a thing to get a conversation going. If just as often, if I'm talking about the release of a new book and I don't have a cover yet, or I've already shown the cover or anything else like that, I'll pick a character from the book that I have artwork for and share it. But I also recently started doing something where I have a very good as you might imagine, if I commission a lot of artwork, I have a very good relationship with an illustrator. And I had the illustrator do a stack of just sort of the types of posts you might have, like, I'm looking for comments on this, or hey, here's an update and here's some news and this is a sale. And it's just a black and white illustration of one of my characters in a situation with a word that's associated with what I'm posting about. So, I have a picture of one of my characters, 3 of my characters, named Rill, who I put up anytime I'm looking for comments. And it's got a big word comment. And it's got a picture of the character looking all excited. So I have a lot. I have a whole stack of post-specific pictures that involve my characters, and I've often get more comments on the image than the actual thing I'm trying to push. So they're very effective at getting the eye of readers, and they're fun.
Yeah, it's definitely easier to get a little interaction on Facebook if you use a picture or photo or something. And I usually just use some stock art stuff unless I happen to have a little extra from the cover art or something of a new thing. But I do love the idea of commissioning stuff. It's usually just a time thing for me. I have a hard time finding artists, and then actually liking what they produce is kind of something I struggle with. I'll find somebody who does something awesome for somebody else's stories, and then I get mine and I'm like, what happened? So I guess I'm just hard to please. I'm sorry, artists out there. Before we get towards the end of the hour, I did want to ask about foreign rights, since you mentioned that that's actually a pretty good earner for you. And I feel like a lot of indie authors feel that that's elusive. It's sort of like something you have to have an agent to go out and get foreign rights deals. And it's pretty rare that an agent will just take you on to go on for foreign rights deals. How did yours come about? And it sounds like it's been worth any hassle you might have gone through with, did you do IP lawyer or anything like that for your contracts?
Yeah, well, so the way it came about was I've had a fairly long career at this point, and I've had 2 points in my career where I had huge spikes in sales for prolonged periods of time. And both of those times, it put me on the radar of groups of people. The first time was in 2012, and a Bulgarian publisher contacted me and wanted to do a Bulgarian translation. And since that was the first time, that's when I did the lawyer thing. And I didn't take the contract they gave me and bring it to a lawyer to get it looked at. What I did was, and I'm not advising this, this is what I did. It's a thing that can be done. I went to an IP lawyer, or rather I called an IP lawyer. I'm local to New York City. So there's a lot of publishing folks in New York City. I called them up and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to be doing potentially going to be doing foreign rights. Could you do me a favor and write me a boilerplate foreign rights contract? Just standard run-of-the-mill, average expectation for earnings and all that stuff. But I want a thing that represents, an acceptable contract, a template. And he did so, and it was very reasonable. The guy worked with, I wish I could remember his name, but at this point it's almost 10 years, 9 or 10 years ago that I worked with him. He gave me, the contract. And then when I got the actual contract from the the Bulgarian publisher, I went through and I sort of compared them point by point. okay, this is what this means because I know that because I talked to the guy. And so I understood all the terms, and it was similar enough that the things I was told to watch out for weren't red flags, and I went through with it. And that has been my policy going forward. I have a known example of a good contract. And if you're in places like SFWA, they often have sort of example contracts you can do this with, so you could even skip the lawyer thing that I did. So yeah, they contacted me, and the Bulgarian one, the experience was okay. I got paid, but I only got paid the one time. Either it has not earned back its advance, or they have been unscrupulous. I tend to believe it hasn't earned back its advance. But then in 2014,
unscrupulous is good too. I mean,
sure, yeah, whatever. then I'll get the lawyers involved again. But then it happened again in 2014. I had a really good run on Barnes and Noble in 2014, and agents started to get interested, and publishers started to get interested, and a German publisher got into contact with me. There, I'll say their name because I've had a much better experience with them. That's Zapdos, who got in contact with me, and they were like, "We really like your book. We'd like to do your trilogy." So same thing, compared contracts, looked good. There were okay. I talk about things to watch out for. Ancillary rights was one of the things I learned. Ancillary rights means, everything that's not specifically the permission to do the book. Ancillary rights includes things like television rights and movie rights. So if you see a contract that says, print, audio, and ancillary rights, don't sign it. You're telling them they're allowed to make a movie. But anyhow, I did their thing, and it's definitely been worth it because first off, it's stuck in the top 100 of the German language, the German Amazon store for months. It got their all-star bonus. It was fantastic. It made back its advance in like the first 3 weeks, and then I was getting like the contract said I was supposed to get paid once a quarter. I was getting monthly payments because they didn't want to be carrying that level of balance pending for me. It went well enough that they have since picked up the next couple of books in the series, and they have expanded to translating it to French and Italian, I believe. So it's absolutely been worth it. That having been said, it wouldn't have been worth it to me to go and get them. This was super worth it because all I had to do was make sure I wasn't getting, taken advantage of with the contract, and then give them permission to do it. But I hesitate to think the legwork it would take to make this happen without having someone come to me first.
Yeah, your German publisher was actually forward-thinking enough to put you in Kindle Unlimited and KDP Select, which I did not have that experience when and I don't think mine, I never got any money from it. So I'm assuming, as you are with the Bulgarian publisher, that it just never made any money. So the answer to my original question is how you find these people is they find you if you sell a whole bunch of books.
Yeah. I've been to many, I've been to a few conferences. And frequently the subject of foreign rights comes up. And there was a time back when like the gold rush was happening, when if you had a strong enough ebook sales, then there would be someone who would be more than happy to represent you for just foreign rights. And I'm sure they still exist, but that's not quite so easy to find anymore. So I got lucky, and lucky I certainly was. And it's worth doing if you get lucky, but I cannot speak to how you would make it happen.
Okay, so what do you think an author who has limited time or resources should focus on first, like print, foreign translations of ebooks, the audiobooks, or writing the next book?
Almost always I feel like writing the next book is best. If you're just getting started, we've spoken in having a strong catalog is one of the best ways that you can guarantee you're going to have a career. More products equals more flexibility, equals more sell-through, equals 1,000 other things. So writing your next book is always important. However, even if it's not a huge earner, I really suggest print. Lindsay mentioned having a higher priced item on your list really underscores the value of the lower priced items. So, if you have a book that's $2.99 and a paperback that's $9.99, suddenly it seems like your book is on sale for $3 because, there is a price that is higher than that. Plus, some people only buy paperback, and paperback is good. So once you know how to make it, there's not a lot of effort that goes into making a paperback. So I definitely think that's worth doing. For the other stuff, foreign rights is hard. Again, if they come to you, fantastic. If you have to go to them, maybe leave that for later in your career. Audiobooks, they definitely have a bigger bang, but they also have bigger buck. Like you can do royalty sharing and stuff, but it's a major decision to make. It gives you way less flexibility, and it requires exclusivity and a bunch of other things.
And if the book goes big, then you're sharing royalties for the rest of forever.
Yeah. So I like to do all my stuff either traditionally published, which again happens if people are interested enough in your stuff. Almost all of my audiobooks became traditionally published because of that 2014 spike in sales. But so if you have the resources, absolutely have audiobooks made. They will eventually pay themselves back. It might take a really long time. It might be instantaneous. But they're also a useful thing to have because it's a format that's popular and they say is gaining popularity. But it costs a lot of money. So I would put that low priority early on unless you, and this is a big unless you feel as though you can produce it yourself. You probably can't produce it yourself. Like covers, there's a lot of people who think that they can pull this off, but it will show side by side with a professionally published thing. So yeah. So again, early on, starting off, write your next book. If you get good at formatting, do print for sure. And then everything else can sort of wait once you start making money and start making a career of things.
And you can find print formatters who only charge like $25,
Oh, yeah.
So it's super easy to get a print book. My biggest thing was audiobooks because I still haven't done any of my audiobooks. I get approached about once a month by audio like narrators, but all that cash that, my business makes goes to like medical bills, and having kids and emergency surgeries or keeping the business afloat during months when things aren't going as well, And so I still haven't put a focus on audiobooks, and that's something I'm trying to rectify. I've actually chosen a narrator for my first series, and I'm going to be bothering Lindsay later about her Kickstarter campaign to get her the crowdsourcing going, because I have a hard time wanting to fork over the cash if if it's going to take a few years, then.
Yeah, and that's why, again, like I have never shopped around for an audiobook publisher. I've published through 2 different audiobook publishers in the past, and I've been fairly happy with both of them. But I never haggled on an advance or anything like that because I wouldn't have done audiobook. I've, again, self-produced audiobooks twice. Jade is one of my books, and The Karen Apprentice is one of my books. I paid for myself. And one of them just finished paying itself back after 5 years, and the other one quite a while before it pays itself back. But even if you get a microscopic advance from an audiobook publisher, as long as they're doing good work, they're not just producing a crap product, that might be worthwhile for you if you just want to have audiobooks. So like whatever, you get an audiobook publisher who does good work, but can only afford to give you like a $100 advance. You could almost certainly get a better advance from another place. But what they're really giving you is a $7,000 discount on getting an audiobook. So it's something to consider, even if you're a little hesitant, as long as you do your homework on the company and know that they're on the up and up.
Yeah, I've done a mix of doing it myself through ACX with the audiobooks, and then I have Podium Publishing has done quite a few of my series, and it's definitely my number 2 overall for earning. I don't make as much as some authors I've seen have just really taken off either through design or accident via audio, and I'm always like, wow, I feel like I should be putting more effort into this and trying to do more rather than just like, well, it's for sale with the ebook. So if you see it on Amazon and want it, you should get it. But I've had, I've made pretty decent money, both with Podium and then doing it myself. I would actually hesitate to recommend somebody do that unless it's a book that's probably selling. I usually say if it's selling 500 copies a month, you're probably going to earn back pretty quickly when you do the audiobooks. If you're not selling very much of a book, it is a pretty good investment, and I wouldn't assume it would earn back, honestly. I mean, it's like ebooks. If it's way down in the rankings, nobody's going to find it. But that's certainly up to you if you want to jump into that. I make money. I've done the backlist stuff traditionally through ACX, and last year I did my first series, the front list. As I was publishing the ebooks, and I obviously made more on that. It's a little easier if you can get them out. Like with book 1, ebook 1 comes out at the same time as the paperback and the audiobook. That's your best shot for doing well with audio. And I did that one through ACX, non-exclusive, and through Findaway Voices, which someday we should be able to get them on the show. We had them on our last show. They're doing quite a bit, so they're definitely worth watching. If you go exclusive with ACX, it's a 40% royalty. If you go non-exclusive, it's 25%. So you have to decide if you can potentially make that 15% or more elsewhere by not just being in Apple and Amazon and ACX, basically, or Audible. I think it's probably about even for me. I actually have sold more on Findaway than I thought I would, and if you go that route, you have the option of setting the prices yourself, which you do not have on ACX. On Findaway, I think I've got right now the first book in my Agents of the Crown 5-book series for 99 cents. And even though I don't even know most of the places where they sell it, they're the ones that will get you on Kobo and Google Play. I know that those two, but the rest of the places are like, oh, there's some library sales and stuff. So I haven't promoted those books at all on those places, but I've still made some sales. So I will definitely be exploring that more in the future. I keep, keep doing the audiobooks because everybody says, it's growing, it's growing, it's growing. And I've seen some of that. I hope to see more in the future. But are you just with your ones you've produced yourself, Joe, on ACX now? I know Findaway has kind of just come on in this last year or so.
The two that I produced myself, as soon as I found out Findaway Voices was an option, I went to their site, I read their stuff, and I decided to put my stuff on there. And I also make more money than I would expect because I expected to make no money. And I make more than no money. But the other thing about Findaway that's good, again, if you're non-exclusive on ACX, you can immediately, even if you were produced through ACX, non-exclusive, you can put the exact same files up on Findaway. There's no problem with that. If you produce it yourself, not through ACX, of course you can put it up on Findaway. And you can also produce through Findaway, although I've never done that. Another thing about Findaway that's useful, aside from being available in more places than the others, is Findaway, you say, you can set your own price, which is super nice. You can also, they have monthly promotional signups. Like they legit, you can go and say, hey, I'm looking to do a price promo this month, and they'll sort of maintain a list of price promos. So yeah, Findaway is so much easier to promote in that it is possible to promote. Because again, on our previous podcast, the question of how you promote audiobooks was a big question because you had no control over price and you couldn't discount them. And Findaway gives you options in both of those cases. So it's definitely worth doing if you haven't gone exclusive. And I have heard and cannot confirm that even if you did go exclusive, after a certain amount of time, you can sort of change your mind on that. If you did not do profit share. If you didn't do revenue share, then you potentially have the possibility to alter your agreement even before the 7-year contract is up. If you did do revenue share, tough luck, you're stuck. Likewise with Findaway. If you do revenue share with Findaway, then you're kind of stuck there too.
I've heard the same thing, that people have successfully emailed ACX and said like, hey, can I get it back and go non-exclusive before the 7 years were up. I should add too, the series I have with Findaway is still in KU in ebook form. So it's actually that much more remarkable that people have found the ebooks or the audiobooks, because the ebooks are not available in Google Play and Kobo yet. That series will be coming out soon. And I don't know, we'll see, maybe someday I'll be able to get a BookBub or something and it'll get a big boost. And we should also mention that I have not been invited to participate or anything, but BookBub has the Chirp service now. And I think pretty soon, if not already, you might be able to submit your audiobooks if you can lower the price and make it a deal, which again, you can do if it's through Findaway. I'm not sure how that works with Amazon and Apple, because I know Audible won't match the price, Amazon. So it's still going to be like $19.99 or whatever on Amazon, and not over there. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know Findaway Voices allows you to set books up for free, and it'll be on iTunes or whatever they call themselves now for free, which is good. But I didn't know that about Amazon not price matching. That's kind of not forward thinking of them for a very forward thinking company. Okay, Joe, how do you keep up on all of your streams of revenue? So are there any services that you use, any systems that you follow on a regular basis to keep up and to know what you're making on different income sources?
There's a thing called TrackerBox that I use. It's just a program. You download all of your different sales things and it digests them into a database. But also, as mentioned at the top of the hour, I worked IT for 9 years. So I I have on more than one occasion written my own Python scripts to write my own database, to do my own stuff. That said, I don't do it very often. When you've been at it long enough, you can sort of get an idea of how your stuff is performing based upon a couple of sort of just market indicators. So you end up with, like, whatever, my income is usually about equal on Amazon and non-Amazon. So if I just keep track on the day-to-day on Amazon, it gives me a rough estimation of how I'm doing across the board. So whereas I don't use any services to do this stuff, but I when I need to do a deep analysis of my sales, I will use either my own database or something called TrackerBox. I'm a data guy, so I'm accustomed to that stuff. And at the end of the year is when I usually end up doing like the real deal analysis, because I got to do your taxes anyway. So at the end of the year, I'll download all of the stuff that's available historically for that year, and I'll process it and sort of look at the trends and things. Other than that, it's just the daily sales indicators. Smashwords has daily sales, and of course, Amazon has daily sales. So day to day, I look at those as my indicators, and then monthly or annually, I either pull it in with my own database or use TrackerBox.
Now, for those who don't know what TrackerBox is, where did you get it? How much does it cost? Is it like a yearly subscription?
TrackerBox is a purchasable product. It's not a service, so you only pay for it once. It's Windows only, and just if you just search for, I think it's just TrackerBox with no space, you'll find it. Yeah, I don't remember the name of the publisher. I bought it a while ago, and I only use it twice a year, so I'm not 100% up to date on that information.
All right. Well, I think that's about the end of our questions for you, Joe. We've been rambling for about an hour. You get to talk more on this episode. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, it all balances out.
All right. Well, do you guys, either of you, have any final thoughts on diversifying income for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think it's important. I mean, readers, come from all sorts of places, and you never know when one source of income will dry up. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel comfortable in saying I probably wouldn't still be a full-time self-published author if I hadn't diversified. There have been times where, like, the foreign rights thing comes in, and it's like, I don't know, this year's been pretty weak. Oh, here's an extra $15,000. That's nice, Like, being diverse really has a way of it's like a capacitor for your finances. Like, nothing is going to hit the entire market. I can't say nothing. Most things will not hit the entire market all at once. So if you can get a wide enough stance, you can weather an awful lot of volatility in separate areas.
And as people should get the gist from what we've been talking about. Even if you decide to be exclusive with Amazon for ebooks so that you can be in KU, you can do all these other things. You can do print books, and those can be anywhere. If you want to do Findaway Voices for audiobooks, those can be anywhere. And like I said, I'm selling audiobooks even when the ebooks aren't available everywhere. And of course, Patreon and Kickstarter are things you can check out too if that's of interest. So yeah, diversify. Good stuff. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please visit sixfigureauthors.com if you want to leave a comment or ask a question for a future show.
And that's the number 6.
The number 6. Somebody took it out of my notes here. Sixfigureauthors.com, the number 6. Hopefully one day we'll be popular enough that you can just throw that, any iteration of that in there, and you'll get us. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.